everybody interacts with the people who are speaking. This is not just an information event. This is a type of event where you can interact with the person who's up here, ask questions, or just say that you feel them and you understand what's going on, and that you have an idea that what they're saying is not just for their health, not just to say, oh yeah, I got some press time, but it's to actually put some information, some knowledge and wisdom out there into the atmosphere of the universe, and just for y'all to accept it. That's all it is. So hopefully we have a good time tonight. First off, I'd like to introduce my man, my homeboy. This is Mr. Anthony Roebuck. He's the guy who put this whole thing together. He's a man with a vision. He's a guy who hopes to do a lot of things for his community. He's also a guy who cares a lot about people that are close to him, as well as the people who are connected to him through his community, through his church, through organizations like Stop Mass Incarceration around the Valley. Everything that he does is out of love. So I'd like for y'all to give a warm welcome to Mr. Anthony Roebuck.
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
All right.
I know it's kind of hot. I know we're kind of running late. There was a big accident on Salem, so a lot of people had went to the seminary in Trotwood, so they're trying to work their way here. So I was trying to give them a little bit of time to get here. Mayor McDonald couldn't be here tonight. There's some issues going on in the city of Trotwood, and I don't know if everybody knows, Hair Arena is closed down now. They officially closed today, so she's trying to work on that and get that situated. So she sends her apologies, and she said she will be at the next event. We're going to go ahead and jump right into it with our first speaker, which is going to be Zakia Sankara Jabbar, who is the most awesome person in the world. She is a true fighter for justice, for racial justice, especially for our babies in education. She works non-stop. I know she just got back from DC last night, Columbus earlier today, so give her a round of applause.
I wish I had a mic. I am tired, you guys, but I'm happy to be here. Y'all know I gotta love y'all. I'm here today because I am very exhausted. I just, as he said, got back from DC late last night. Was there doing some of our federal advocacy and lobbying work around educational justice, specifically meeting with the chief state school officers. Anthony, I wanted to give you these to pass out to folks. Meeting with the chief state school officers, which is sort of like a quasi-union for state superintendents or state directors of education, or whatever they call themselves in each state. So in Ohio, we do have a state superintendent who is governed by a state school board, which AJ Wagner happens to be our representative on the state school board. So that was very interesting. It was a good meeting. We talked about our work locally and statewide, specifically around ESSA. So for folks who don't know what ESSA is, or ESSA, it's the most recent reauthorization of the Every Student Succeeds Act. So the ESSA, or ESEA, was Every Student Educational Act that was initially signed by President Lyndon Baines Johnson. It was a part of all the civil rights bills that created the Department of Education. So we actually did not have a U.S. Department of Education before the Civil Rights Movement. So I think that's really critical to understand that education is a human right, it's a civil right, and so we're working to protect that. Education for many of our children, black children in particular, not just in Dayton or in Ohio, but really nationally, is not working very well. That is by design, and we don't have time to discuss all of that today. I can do that at a later time, is really unpack political analysis around why education is not working for African American children. One thing I do want to make sure that I say is that it's not because black children or black families can't succeed or don't want to succeed. Part of our vision statement, for folks who don't know, for Racial Justice Now, is really dealing with institutionalized and systemic racism.
Right.
And so that impacts in every single institution of our lives, including education, pre-K through 12, and higher ed as well. Speaking of higher ed, I had an opportunity to attend a conference earlier today. It was actually at Wright State. Dr. Hazel Roundtree, who's also a school board member on the Dayton School Board, invited me to the Ohio Diversity Council Conference. She actually started it 8 years ago with a couple other higher ed diversity officers within the state, and had an opportunity to speak on behalf of the community there briefly and about our work. So what has racial justice now been doing? So we've been causing a lot of problems for education departments statewide and of course within DPS. I will say that I'm really excited that our most recent, and I think one of the biggest accomplishments was really working hard the last several years to get our former superintendent to do the Office of Black Male Achievement, or what Dayton is calling the Office of Males of Color. That was a huge win. It's only the third such office in the entire nation. The first one was in Oakland, the second one was in Minneapolis. And so because I have an opportunity to travel and really look at other models in other cities and see how they're working, and sort of the precipitous that created it, I thought it was very bold because well, not now so much, but we were living in a climate where to talk about race was taboo. We were living in a climate where to talk about, the systemic oppression of Black people, but Black males in particular in the education system and all other systems was taboo. And so I thought that, Oakland was really progressive to say we want an office just for Black males. I would have never thought about even trying to attempt to approach anything like that in Dayton. I mean, just because of the political environment, Black people, white people, nobody really wants to deal with the elephant in the room. But when I first approached Superintendent Ward about this, she literally looked at me like I was crazy. Like, there's no way I can get that done. But I kind of helped her process and think through how Oakland got it done. And I said, use the data to your advantage. I was like, people really can't argue with the numbers.
Yep.
Like, use the data. And so she actually went through and looked at the data, and we helped because in 2014, Racial Justice Now created the first statewide school discipline report card. Dayton Public Schools got an F, like most other school districts, regarding school discipline and expulsion rates. But nationally, African American children are disproportionately impacted by suspensions and expulsions. Even the president, the U.S. Department of Education, everybody acknowledges a school-to-prison pipeline now. And so there are more resources, there is more political education around this issue, and so that was something else I said she could use to her advantage to get our school board to support something like that. It still took a couple of years to do, and working on it. We brought in national organizations, the NEA, which is the National Education Association. Advancement Project was a national racial justice civil rights group in DC. And a number of other folks. We use data, we use empirical data, we use stories of students who have been impacted. I mean, I use my own life story with my own child, my own son. So it was tough. And I think that when it came down to it, the way that we worked together was that we pushed the school board to do, and Anthony, you were part of that, and thank you for your support around that, but we pushed the school board to have an open vote on it. So if you vote this down, the community will know that you are saying you really don't care.
Wow.
I mean, because you have all the data, you have all the information, you see that this is proven to work in other two cities, and so the board actually did vote unanimously to create it, but now the process begins to keep it.
Yeah.
We have a new superintendent, and the implementation process is not where we would like it to be right now. In fact, I actually got a call today from someone who got one of the facilitator jobs, sharing some things that they were upset about. So the work continues, you guys. Like,
Right.
I mean, that's a huge accomplishment, but it could be gone literally like that if we as a community don't stand up and demand that we keep it. Demand that the school board continue, I'll take the question in a second. Demand that the school board continues to fund it, because they did fund it to the tune of about $500,000. And so we're asking that those dollars stay from the general fund. And we're also asking for robust training for our facilitators to get the professional development that they need to be able to support the students that they're supposed to be working with in the particular schools that they're supposed to be working with. It's a heavy lift, you know, for one organization to, you know, kind of keep the school district and really the city accountable to our community in particular. So one of the things too, and I'm sharing a lot about Superintendent Ward now because I'm happy for her. She's moved on. She's going to be in Cleveland. But she helped me to realize that I could not just stop at the school. Like, I could not just continue to complain to the school district that these children are part of a larger community.
Right.
Like, a lot of what happens in school is really influenced by the conditions and the environments and neighborhoods that these kids live in. And she taught me something because I was very myopic, like when, like this attack. Not her personally, but the school system, and not really thinking about or thinking more critically about the communities that our children are coming from, that they live in, you know. And so that becomes not just a Dayton Public Schools issue, right? That becomes a City of Dayton issue. That becomes a Montgomery County issue. And so to that end, you know, Racial Justice Now has began to expand our focus from not just, you know, racial justice within the school system, but racial justice for the entire community, and the community being responsible to our community, in particular in West Dayton. So I kind of want to leave it there. I'm like, again, I don't want to take up too much time, but I did see a hand, and I wanted to answer your question.
I don't have two quick questions. What was the name of the board, like the official name of the board group that was just appointed, like to work with minorities and black?
The official name of the office?
Official name of the office.
So it's called Office of Males of Color, and that's a battle. I want to tell you a little story behind that. Me and her fought about that. I was like, that is not what this is about. This is about black males. We were real clear about that. So when you do an organizing and policy work, you learn politics real quick, you know. So because the city of Dayton, particularly Commissioner Jeff Mims, was involved with the city's Males of Color program, she wanted to be fair and to be consistent with that and call it Males of Color, even though we all know who we're talking about. What was your other question?
The other question was, what was their level of interaction? Well, what would be the level of interaction with the community?
So again, I mean, I think that's like the $1 million question. I don't.
What would be the level of interaction with the community?
So I was at the last school board meeting. I'm at all the school board meetings, and that was a question that I asked. You know, where was the progress? When was there going to be a report out to the community? What's happening? School is about to start August 16th. Where are we at? And unfortunately, DPS has just went through a big transition. So we have a new superintendent and a new treasurer. So the new superintendent does not have a lot of information about the office. We did meet with her. I think, you know, and I'm just being real cautious here, I think she will continue to support this. And I think that she will continue to work with us and other community members who want to have a stake in it and want to have involvement in it. Because I think that although there are like 5 paid positions, like they still want, you know, young men such as yourself like to come in and be a part of it. Anthony has been a part of some of the stuff. I know that, you know, what Commissioner Mims has done from the city side. So I'm hoping that that will continue and be a little bit more robust and scaled up a lot more. But I could also put you in contact with the actual coordinator or the director over the program to see how, you know, you could get involved.
I know people say this all the time, that this racism, systemic racism is a problem in the school system. Can you just talk a little bit on maybe 3 or
the simplest answer is that, you know, it has to be rooted in the historical context of what white domination means and what white supremacy means and anti-blackness and all of that. And so when you think about how to control the people, right, you really control the narrative. You control the information that they get. You control how they feel about themselves. You control what they think about themselves. And I'm actually glad that you brought up that question because one of the things our work as racial justice now is continuously evolving. And for me, for personal reasons, I have found that this work is extremely mentally and spiritually taxing.
Yes.
And so there has to be some kind of healing mechanism for us from racial trauma. And you will be surprised, but I was so blessed to find out that Community Healing Network existed and something called Emotional Emancipation Circles. I had an opportunity to attend a conference in DC last year, and I'm getting to a point here. Because it specifically focuses on Black people and what the Association of Black Psychologists call the lie of Black inferiority. And when I really sat back and like processed that, I'm like, that is so true because there's so much messaging. So not just in our education system, but from the media, from other people, like there's so much messaging around our inferiority. But that started with our dehumanization hundreds of years ago, right? And so white superiority and all that. So like decolonizing, like how we think, unlearning a lot of that stuff is what the emotional emancipation healing circles are about. Sister Lynn is going to be involved in that process. I think Tiffany may be involved in that, and some other sisters, Monica, have expressed interest to starting a working group here in Dayton. And I think that even too for like organizers and healing between us, right, as Black folks. Let's be real. You know, there's a lot of, and I'm guilty too. So that's why I'm putting it out there. There's a lot of like infighting that we do with each other, and it has a lot to do with everything that I just talked about and being connected, you know, to how we feel about ourselves and to how we process information, the information that we've learned about ourselves. I think the biggest laugh I got this week was like people was really pissed. Like they really thought Michelle Obama was a liar when they found out that enslaved Africans built the White House.
Right.
And I'm just like, no. Like blame the education system, blame the history book. So that's what we're talking about. Like, so information is literally controlled. But who has the power to do that? We don't have the power to do that. And so just trying to get us to do those healing circles to decolonize how we think about ourselves and to just love each other more. It's not to the exclusion of anybody else, but just love on each other, you know what I mean? And try to work through conflicts a lot better. I think not only will it solve some of the problems around interracial violence, right? I think it will solve a lot of that. But I also think it would help liberate us in this current, you know, system that is extremely anti-Black, that is extremely dominated, you know, by this idea of white supremacy. So it's deep, but it's really helpful, and I've seen how it's worked in other communities, and I'm really excited, you know, about the idea of it coming here to Dayton. So I don't want to take up any more time. I know that there's other folks coming. I've got cars and stuff for folks too. What's up, Princess?
I would just can I ask this quick question?
Sure.
Okay. So I know you were talking about that racial justice now is moving to not reinvent themselves, but expanding their mission. Evolve, exactly. That's the word you used. So to like understanding that these systems are connected to the city, connected to our communities, and the condition of our communities. So one thing that I hear in that is like there is a level of integration in how we actually tackle these systems.
Oh, yeah.
So I guess my question is, when we're talking about taking down these other systems that create the school system problem, where do you see racial justice now positioning themselves in that fight? And specifically, I'm talking about community organizing, electoral politics, and public policy.
Man, you smart. That's a hell of a question, and that's
And then
actually
we can talk
something.
about it later.
No, I mean, but I want to answer this really quickly for the audience because that's a struggle I've been going through internally with the folks that are on our steering committee and with the folks that we work with and with the folks that we're connected with nationally is because in this whole movement for Black Lives and Black Lives Matter and everything, so for me, I'm not a protester. Like, I'm not going to march, but I love my folks who do. I believe and the vision that I see racial justice now going through, and this is a huge vision, because you know how hard it is for Black-led organizations to raise money, especially for foundations, but honey, we'll talk about that later. I see us being a very strong political organization that explicitly represents the interests of Black people no matter how we come. So sexual identity, if you Black, if you one of us, we're representing the best interest of us. And I think that it has to be okay for folks for that because one, and I use the sexual orientation for a reason because one thing that I've learned from organizations like the Human Rights Campaign is we have to have patience.
Yeah.
And we also have to create our own narratives and to use that power to shape how other people think. And that's exactly what they've done. I mean, the fight for marriage equality, we can talk about, you know, the intersections of race and then how is it really helping Black LGBT folks, right?
Yeah.
But the way that they did that, they were extremely political. Like, some of us complain about sitting in meetings. We didn't even know who these people were until like recently, like when they started, like we just started seeing all of the policy changes that they were winning. Like all of the money that they put into making sure that, you know, media campaigns, all of that has to happen, you know, for us. So I see us doing something similar for Black folks.
Yeah.
And local. Yeah. Statewide though, statewide.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Real quick, before the next speaker comes up, I want to recognize a young man. He was part of the 3 individuals who put together the protest or the rally earlier this month, and who's also put together the rally for tomorrow at 3 o'clock, right?
Yeah.
3 o'clock. Coming up, Chris Landrum II.
That's real quick, right?
I'll bring you to it tomorrow.
My name is Chris Landry II. Right now I'm a student at Edison State Community College on scholarship for basketball. And it's just so crazy how the whole process of that happened. You know, Wednesday, on that week when I saw the video of Alton Sterling, it made me teary-eyed. It hurt me really hard. And I called my girlfriend right there in the riot, and I was like, we got to do something. She's like, well, baby, you didn't put on a march. So I said, you know what? We're going to do something. And I set my event for the 30th, which we was going to march to Centerville. Because I said I felt like the white community need to see us because it doesn't make sense. We're going to the Black community and we need to, I want to make a different stance of what Mia portrayed protesting. So we was going to do that originally. But since this one was such a big success, we neglected that one and said we want to get more of the youth involved. So this one's going to be more about youth empowerment and really pushing for the John Crawford case. I don't know how familiar you guys are with that, but I can share with you some things that now work for Michael Wright. The reason why that has not gone to trial is really an inside job. Right. The police officer that killed him is the only officer in that 100 years of the department that's killed 2 people. And the call that they was looking for, they actually called his father. His father been in the police department for 30 years. Right. He ignored the call he's supposed to go to, turned around and went to the call there and used his own rifle gun for that. And we gotta get justice in some type of way. So we're trying to really push for the youth to come out and stand, and we're going to showcase local talent that way. And then our next event, honestly, we want to work on kind of like a barbecue for the police officers in the department here. So we got a couple things going on now. When I thought I would have been a young activist like this, no, but I think this is really good for somebody to see somebody as young as me trying to push for the youth to do do something good.
We
So
appreciate
I don't want to
it.
take more of you guys' time.
Paul,
We'll just
what did you say you go to?
I go to Edison State. It's a junior college in Pickawall High, about 30 minutes from the city.
Okay.
Yes, but thank you guys. Appreciate you all.
Thank you,
who
brother
came.
Chris. Hey, Chris.
It's always good to see the youth in service. Definitely. We all got youth in us all the time. This next person is another youthful person who's coming to give some wisdom. His name is Mr. Stephen Muhammad, and he's come to talk about Black people, African Americans in the media today. Please give it up for him. See, he's setting up. He's the media guru right now. He's like, I gotta get my right angles and whatnot. Sorry, I'm messing with you.
Right there, please.
In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, I would like to greet all of you in the greeting words of peace. We say it in the Arabic language of Assalamu alaikum, but in the English language, which is the slave master's language, which is the foreign language, it simply means peace be unto you. And with so much chaos and calamity going on, there's no better greeting than to greet your brother and your sister and really mean it than the greeting words of peace of Assalamu alaikum. I want to thank Brother Anthony Roebuck for inviting me to speak on this very important topic, as Sister Zakia touched on it, when we talk about who controls the information. I want to thank the organization of Stop Mass Incarceration Network, Miami Valley, and I want to thank this beautiful edifice, the United Theological Seminary, for hosting this event. I'm talking on media, youth, and mass incarceration. Media, youth, and mass incarceration. As Sister Zakia said, we live in a system of white supremacy. It is not a localized system, it's a global system. This system that is localized has what's called institutional racism. Now, one of the things that I like to do is to link our experience with what we read in Scripture. Because from a Nation of Islam point of view, the black man and the black woman, we are the fulfillment, or we are fulfilling what is written in the Scriptures. And one of the things that we find that is written in the Scriptures is this in the book of Moses. And it goes like this. It goes like, in the book of Moses, I went to Genesis, but in Moses, Pharaoh speaking, Pharaoh saying, pulling all of his officials together, and he said this. He said, come, let us deal with them wisely, lest they multiply, join on to another army, and come against us. Now, to put that all in perspective, we have to begin to realize that we have grown. We have always been, if you all remember the Katrina incident, where we were called out and classified by the mainstream media as refugees in our own country. So we have always, as a people, been seen as not exactly a part of the American melting pot. We have always been seen in the system of white supremacy as a threat. And as a consequence, there has always been a covert war on the black man and the black woman. One of the reasons why there's this covert war is that when you study demographics, they are saying that the white population, the majority of the white population, is in the older category. and minority populations are in a young category, particularly young black people. So when you look at the civil rights movement, there was a system called COINTELPRO. How many are familiar with the system of COINTELPRO? The system of COINTELPRO was the counterintelligence agency of J. Edgar Hoover. And this is what some of this system was talking about. Listen to this. The purpose of this new counterintelligence endeavor is to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize the activities of black nationalist hate-type organizations and groups and their leaders, spokesmen, membership, and supporters, and to counter their propensity for violence and civil disorder. The activities of all such groups of intelligence interests to the Bureau must be followed on a continuous basis so we will be in a position to promptly take advantage of all opportunities for counterintelligence and inspire action in instances where circumstances warrant. So, we're talking about the media and the control and the prison industrial complex. When you all go back to the civil rights movement and the counterintelligence program of J. Edgar Hoover, one of the things that we all realize is the assassination and the infiltration and the destruction of black organizations, right? But one of the things we don't really realize is that there is another program called propaganda. And what happened after the destruction of black organizations and black leaders is that you had what was called black exploitation movies. You all remember that? With Shaft and Superfly. And in these movies, they glorified drug dealing, right? Drug pushing, pimping. And then that was in the 70s. And as you began to realize in the black community, instead of going for doing for self, we began to integrate. But one of the things that happened is there began to be a flood into our communities of guns and drugs. Right. And what we don't realize is that this is called programming. Now I'll go ahead and give you another for instance. In the 80s, you had Poor Righteous Teachers, you had Public Enemy, you had Tribe Called Quest. And then what we didn't realize is that there was the industry, the music industry. Those who were up at the top of the music industry were aligned with the new prison industrial complex called the privatized prisons. So what they did is they began to militarize rap